So good morning, everyone. I'll be discussing about chapter 3 or the research methodology. Okay, so let me share my screen first. Okay. So this is about 15 to 20 minutes lecture. So research methodology will discuss about research design, the methods of data collection, the research instruments that we will be using, the population and sample of study, especially if you will do survey method as a method of data collection, and how would you process your data, and of course the statistical treatment when you do especially when you handle big numbers or big respondents. Okay, so research design should be identified in terms of the research method used, the respondents, the sources of data, and the instruments used in gathering the data. In other words, the design should be explained in such a way that anyone wishing to replicate the study can be guided by the methodology used in the study. That is why kapag po kayo ay naghahanap ng mga related studies, right, from foreign and local studies, titingnan nyo rin yung methodology na ginamit nila. Kasi there are times na, uy, teka, ito palang study na to, pwede ko palang gamitin. Okay? So, tingnan niyo yung yung process nila, tapos tingnan niyo yung topic ninyo, and kung sa tingin niyo ay pwede naman pala na i-align ko or i-pattern ko yung study ko dun sa previous study na ginawa nila because somehow similar yung objectives ng study ninyo, you can also consider that. Okay? It should show the relationship of each subproblem to the hypotheses, the kinds of data selection of secondary sources, including the criteria for the selection of secondary sources if they are not be used, and the methods of organizing, evaluating, and interpreting the data. Okay, you should also adopt a presentation suited to the purpose of the study. So if the study is a sample survey, elaborate on the sampling selection. Okay, so yun. Dito sa chapter 3 na to, dito mo i-discuss how you do the study. Kaya nga, this is the research methodology. Ano yung klase ng design, ano yung design ng research mo, yung methods kung paano mo siya kinolect, paano yung instrument na ginamit mo, yung para ma-collect mo siya, yung research instrument mo, and then yung samples, yan, and or population nung study mo, and of course how would you process it doon dito sa chapter 3 mo dapat i-discuss. Actually, I will be giving you 2 weeks to do this kasi I understand that it's quite challenging, medyo mahaba ang proseso nito. That's why marami kayong especially sa mga related studies na nakuha ninyo, tignan ninyo, i-review ninyo yung ginawa nilang research methodology. Okay? At may possibility or baka na kayo ay similar yung pwede ninyong gawin. Okay? So, the first step in research design is to identify concepts in research problems and to specify them into variables. Okay? So, sa research design, sasabihin natin dito, the decisions on the research design depend on the purpose of the study, the nature of the problem, and the alternatives appropriate for its investigation. Once the purposes have been specified, the study must have explicit scope and direction so that attention can be focused on a delimited target area. Okay, kaya tandaan na, kaya nga mahalaga yung title, yung research problem, kasi nandun din, sa research problem, dun mo makikita kung ano yung objective ng research mo. What is your purpose for doing this research? Okay? Kailangan explicitly na pag sinabing i-scope, 'di ba? Parang microscope or as in naka-focus ka. Yan, pino-focus mo, hahanap, i-weed out mo na yung mga possible na ay hindi ito kailangan. Kaya nga meron kang research design. So it delimit or delimit yung target area mo. And then the nature of problem plays a major role in determining what research design is suitable. Oo, depende nga dun sa type ng study mo. So hindi lahat ng research design ay pwede. So merong ay applicable itong 2 or 3 designs for that. Okay? The design alternatives can be organized into 5 types based on different problem characteristics. Okay. let's have descriptive research first, okay? Descriptive research, it describes systematically a situation or area of interest factually and accurately. So it documents the characteristics of a phenomenon. O example nito ha, surveys, questionnaire, interview, observation. These are descriptive research. Okay? So these are categorized as, meron tayong tinatawag na quantitative, yan, which characterizes population with numerical data and statistical measurement. So pag nagka-quantitative tayo, we do sampling. Okay. So ano yung mga sampling element natin? Ang unit of analysis natin. Itong pag sinabi nating unit of analysis or sampling element, it is the unit about which information is collected and which provides the basis of analysis. Tinitingnan din natin sa sampling ang population or statistical population or universe. So ito yung theoretically, you define aggregation of samples. For example nga, you are looking for ang possible na nagagawan mo ng survey ay mga hotels in Calapan. Ayan. Ngayon, syempre hindi naman lahat ng hotel sa Calapan ay kaya mong magawa ng survey. So magsasample ka. So yung population or your statistical population, yan yung lahat ng hotels sa Calapan. And then, kung magko-compute ka ng sample size, kung ilan yung dapat mong interview or gawan mo ng survey. Okay. Sampling frame, it defines survey population, a list of sampling elements na una ko. So that's the sampling frame. That's yun yung dinidiscuss ko kanina. And then the sampling unit, it is what you choose, elements or set of elements that are selected or eligible to be selected. In the case, doon ba sa surveyan ninyo, ito ba ay mga mga may-ari ng hotels, mga managers ng hotels, or mga employees ng hotel? So ito yung sampling unit. Ito pwede kasing element or set of elements na sinelect mo or eligible na maselect mo doon sa study mo. Okay. And then the sample design, it defines the mechanism by which elements from the population are selected into the sample. Ang basic distinction is whether this mechanism is probability or non-probability sample. Okay, let's go to the non-probability sampling. So the likelihood of selection of each element is unknown. So generalization about the population is not possible with the degree of confidence. So hindi mo sure. For example, meron sa inyo mag-study na yung population ng mga nagbabiyahe papunta ng yung mga dumadaan lang sa Calapan Port. Dumadaan na pasahero sa Calapan Port, hindi sila nagsistay sa Mindoro. So medyo mahirap kunin yung population nun. So pwede mong gamitin yung non-probability sampling. So meron tayong tinatawag na convenience or accidental sampling. A convenience sample is used when you simply stop anybody in the street or when you wander around a business, a shop, a restaurant, a theater, or whatever, asking people you meet whether they will answer your questions. O, diba? Alam yung mga kalye survey, ganyan. That's convenience or accidental sampling. In other words, the sample comprises subjects who are simply available in a convenient way to the researcher. So there is no randomness and the likelihood of bias. There is no randomness and the likelihood of bias is high. Okay, so you can draw any meaningful conclusions from the results you obtain. However, itong method na ito ay only feasible, usually it's the only feasible, particularly for researchers with restricted time and resources, and can legitimately be used provided its limitations are clearly understood and stated. Kaya nga doon pa lang sa chapter 1 natin, sinasabi ko na sa inyo, ilalagay niyan doon sa scope and limitation ninyo. Kung gagamit kayo ng convenience or accidental sampling doon sa survey na gagawin ninyo, ilalagay niyo. So kung ano man yung magiging result ng study ninyo, hindi ka agad sasabihin nyo rin at the end doon sa results and discussions ninyo na this is, since this is convenience or accidental sampling ang ginawa namin, it might be blah 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 blah. Hindi siya kaagad, it doesn't represent the whole population. so on and so forth. Judgment or purposive sampling. Purposive sampling targets a particular group of people. So when the desired population for the study is rare or very difficult to locate and recruit for a study, purposive sampling may be the only option. For example, yung ikaw, interested ka sa pag-aral ng cognitive processing speed of young adults who have suffered closed head brain injuries and automobile accidents. So, ang hirap hanapin ng population na 'yan, 'di ba? O dito mo yung yung mga kasi edad ko na nagkaroon ng head injury sa sa motor or sa sa sasakyan. So, medyo mahirap maghanap noon. So, difficult yung population. It's another purposive sampling kung ang pinag-aaralan mo talaga is about yung mga meron sa inyo yung sa mga may diabetes. O di purposive sampling ang gagawin mo. Maghahanap ka talaga ng mga may diabetes, 'di ba? Snowball sampling or chain referral sampling. Ito naman, the researcher initially contacts a few potential respondents and then ask them whether they know of anybody with the same characteristics. Actually, marami sa inyo mostly ang pwedeng gumamit nito or possible gamitin itong snowball sampling kasi especially in our industry sa tourism, hospitality, may mga kakilala ka and then yung kakilala mo na in-interview mo or sinurveyan mo, pwedeng sila rin yung mag-share sa iyo ng, ito, pwede mo siguro itong interviewin. So that's what we call chain referral sampling or snowball sampling. Example, if you wanted to interview a sample of vegetarians, cyclists, people with a particular disability, ayun nga, people who support a particular political party, your initial contacts may well know. So, tulad ng support groups of others. So, under niyan, meron tayong quota sampling. So, quota sampling, it's most widely used among non-probability sampling methods. So, pag sinabi natin quota sampling, the selection of the sample is made by the interviewer who has been given quotas to fill from specified subgroups of the population. For example, ikaw, yung interviewer, actually ikaw researcher, you are told to sample 50 females between the age of 45 and 60. So there are similarities with stratified sampling, but in quota sampling, the selection of the sample is non-random. How, diba? So how tempting it is to ask those who look most helpful, hence it is not the most representative of samples, but extremely useful. Again, dapat talaga sinasabi nyo yan, even sa limitation. So kapag habang nagsusulat kayo, nung inyong manuscript, babalik-balikan nyo talaga. Kahit nasa chapter 3 na kayo, babalikan nyo yung chapter 1, babalikan nyo yung chapter 2. Based dito sa aking ginawang research design, kailangan kong specify doon sa aking scope and limitation. Yung limitation nitong gagawin kong sampling. Okay? Anong advantages nito? It is quick and cheap to organize. Ang disadvantages naman nito is it is not as representative of the population as a whole as other sampling methods. And because the sample is non-random, it is impossible to assess the possible sampling error. So again, bawal bang gamitin to? Hindi. Pwede nyo po itong gamitin. Sorry. Yan. So, pwede mo itong gamitin. It's just that kailangan i-describe nyo or sasabihin nyo extensively yung limitations nung study ninyo based on the method that you used. Now, let's move on to the probability sampling. Kanina, non-probability. Ngayon, probability sampling. So, each element or sampling unit has known equal probability of selection. Okay. Meron tayong tinatawag na simple random sampling. This is the purest form of random sampling and every element in the population has the same probability of selection into the sample. Okay. Paano natin sample nito, every element in the population has the same probability of selection into the sample. Saan ba tayo? Usually yung mga nagsusurvey sa population. Yan, yung mga sa PSA. Yan, madalas sila nagsisimple random sampling sila, ganon. Okay, use of random numbers. Random number tables consist of a randomly generated series of digits, 1, 0 to 9. To make them easy to read, there is typically a space between every 4th digit and between every 10th row. When reading from random number tables, you can begin anywhere, so you can choose a number of random. But having ones you should continue to read across the line or down a column and not jump about. So, as in, naka-jump, 0 to 9 na digits yan, tapos i-random mo. Parang alam mo yun, nagda-dart ka. Systematic random sampling, it is a special case of simple random sampling. So you begin with a list of n elements, or let's say 2,000 elements. So you had to choose a sampling interval. So yung elements mo, over dun sa ilang interval mo. And then randomly choose a number from 1 to k. Okay. So you take that unit and every kth unit thereafter, yun ang gagamitin mo. So that's a systematic sampling with a random start. In our case, mostly, number 2, use of random numbers at saka systematic random sampling, medyo challenging on your part. So you may consider other probability sampling kung probability sampling ang gagamitin ninyo. Stratified random sampling. So stratification involves classification of population into subpopulation or strata. So you then within the separate strata select independent random sampling. Example, kunwari region, sex, urban, rural, etc. So this the stratification used when it is necessary to use different sampling method for each strata and the strata itself to be domain of study. For example, sa atin, 'di ba, balik tayo dun sa hotel or sino ba yung sa sampulan mo? 'Di ba? Meron kang mga owner, meron kang manager, meron kang staff or yung rank and file. So there are times na kung gusto mo talaga stratified random sampling tapos iba-iba yung ipapagawa mo doon sa bawat isa-surveyan mo. So you can do stratified random sampling. Okay? So basta meron siyang strata or may subpopulation ka. So there are 2 types of stratified sampling. Yung isa, proportionate stratified sampling. Yung isa, disproportionate. And then, pwede mo siyang pag-clusterin. Okay. Yung proportionate stratified sampling, the stratification with uniform sampling fraction, that is sample size for each stratum, is determined by its size. So, proportionate. So, pag hati-hatiin mo, 50%, dalawa lang ginawa mong strata, edi 50-50. Yung disproportionate stratified sampling naman, you use different sampling fraction for each stratum. So it is used, kailan to gagamitin? When the strata themselves are themselves the domain of the study and when within stratums variances differ considerably. Especially, di ba, kunwari iba yung manager. Tapos yung i-compare mo yung managers mo at saka yung mga staff mo, definitely, yung managers mo mas kukonti compared dun sa staff kasi mas marami talagang nasa rank and file, o, diba? So hanggang sa supervisory level. So you can do disproportionate stratified sampling. So you can also do cluster sampling. So procedure for sampling groups of elements rather than elements themselves. So groups of elements are called clusters. So bakit mo ginagamit itong cluster sampling? So wala kang sampling frame available. Yun, that's one. And the economy. It is costly to interview individuals who are scattered geographically. In our case, that's true. Kasi nga, yung mga gagawa natin talaga ng sample, malalayo sila. Syempre, gagastos ka. And remember, we have very limited time to do our research. So, ang problem lang sa cluster sampling, cluster homogeneity, so less precise estimate than stratified random sampling. Kasi, ang challenge kasi dito, may possibility na dahil nga cluster mo sila, sa halos sa pare-pareho yung sasabihin nila. Baka mga more than 70% ng sinabi, more than 70% of your respondents ay pare-pareho ng sinasabi. So may possibility na hindi precise or hindi representative yung mga makuha mong sagot. So paano mo ma-determine yung sample size? Okay. So there are several approaches to determining the sample size. Ano yung mga approaches na yon? You can use a census for small populations. You can imitate a sample size of similar studies. O, kaya nga dapat titingnan mo yung sample size din kung paano yung methodology ng ibang mga studies na ginawa. Using published tables. There are times na pag nakita mo na ay ito nakapublish na kapag let's say 20,000 yung population, ito yung number o X number of sample na gagamitin mo. Ganyan. And then you could apply formulas to calculate a sample size. Sige. So this is a sample formula for sampling size. It's usually ginagamit ito. So although tables can provide a useful guide for determining sample size, you may need to calculate the necessary sample size for a different combination of levels of precision, confidence, and variability. So there is a precise approach in determining sample size is the application of one of several formulas. So in 1967, ito po si Yamane. So he provides a simplified formula para makalculate natin ang sample size. Para, for example, you have 2,000 respondents and you want a 95% confidence level. Okay? So, paano natin kukumputin yung sample size? So, yung total population mo over 1 plus yung total population times yung 0.05 kasi 95% plus 5% kasi 0.05 is 5% eh. Di ba? So 100 minus 95%. So 5% or 0.05 square. So in this case, sa 2,000 population mo, you will get 333. Okay? So ganyan po. Yan. And then qualitative. Yan. Qualitative naman. Nandun tayo kanina sa quantitative ha. So alam nyo na yung mga iba't ibang klase ng approaches for that. Hanggang sa sampling. Okay, so quantitative yun. Now, let's move on to qualitative approach. So qualitative provides an in-depth description of persons and groups within a natural setting. So there are approaches to qualitative research. We have narrative, phenomenological, grounded theory, ethnography, and case study. Okay, in this case, sa atin, we have a narrative. Ano yung pagsabi natin narrative qualitative research? It is based on individual's striking life story. Researchers must be able to get the detailed chronology of the person's story. So, ano yung mga sample dito? Life story, autobiography, life history. In our case, we might veer away from this kasi iba po usually. Na-review ko yung mga topics ninyo, most likely hindi kayo mag-narrative approach. Phenomenological. It is based on an individual or group's lived experiences that happened at the same time or from different times but having the same results, thus making it a phenomenon. Yung narrative at phenomenological, usually ginagamit sa social sciences, sa mga sa history, yon, yung mga ganung mga nasa humanities. Okay. Grounded theory, identifying a new theory based on empirical data, generating or discovering a new theory. So pwede kasing medyo challenging to pag grounded theory ang gawin ninyo kasi nga you will craft a new theory based on your survey, based on observation na nagawa ninyo. Medyo challenging itong grounded theory. And it takes time to do it, yung grounded theory. Kasi kailangan talaga na i-review mo yung mga existing theories and based dun sa study mo, ipo-prove mo that your theory should apply now for this case or for this group of population do sa pinag-aaralan mo kasi the other theories do not apply. Yun yung grounded theory. Sa ethnography naman, it focuses on culture. The research should be done with close coordination with a certain group of people to study their culture or must be able to personally experience the ideas, traditions, ways, and means of the subject. So, nasa social sciences, madalas history, social sciences, nasa culture and arts, yung talagang nag-i-immerse sila, they will stay for long in that place para malaman talaga nila anong kultura. And wala tayong means for that. As much as possible, as much as we want to, medyo challenging for us itong gawin nating ethnography. Kasi for example, maganda sana may mag-aral sa atin ng kultura, ng mga mangyan, tapos i-connect mo sa turismo, anong epekto ng turismo sa mga mangyan for the past 10 years, ganon, 'di ba? Medyo challenging lang talaga. Okay? Case study. Yan. Ito ang madalas. Makikita ko sa mga studies ninyo, marami sa inyo ay magki-case study. It is a study based on an issue that is explored through one or more cases in a bounded system. So it uses in-depth data collection and involves multiple sources of information. So talagang puro data collection yan doon sa cases mo. Tapos, ano yan, pag-aaralan ninyo based doon sa na-collect mo, paano mo siya ika-cluster, yung ideas, ganon. Kasi hindi ka kumuha ng sample. Walang mga sample sizes yan, mga ganon. Hindi quantitative yung analysis mo dyan. Although there are times na may mga sub-analysis ka na ay merong isang section doon yung isang source ng isang source mo doon sa case study mo na magkakaroon ka din ng ng quantitative. May possibility ng ganun din. Historical research. So it explains past event, it reconstructs the past objectively and accurately, which is often in relation to the tenability of a hypothesis. So according to Burge and Loon, historical research involves the following steps. So identify an idea, topic, or research question. You conduct a background literature review. You refine the research idea and questions and determine that historical methods will be used. Identify and locate primary and secondary data sources, evaluate the authenticity and accuracy of source materials, and analyze the date and develop a narrative exposition of the findings. Usually kasi talaga itong historical research you analyze the date and develop a narrative exposition of the findings based do sa steps na ginawa mo. Okay? Now, we can also do correlation research. Okay? Correlation. So ito ay pasok sa pasok yan sa qualitative. Yan. Correlational research. It determines the relationship of two or more variables. It investigates the variations in one factor correspond with one or more. If one factor corresponds with one or more other factors based on correlation coefficient. Actually, when I do correlation research, I do it quantitatively. Usually, yung parang kino-compute mo kung may computation ng correlation research yung computein mo kung may correlation itong variable or isang factor na to doon sa sa factors mo. Ano ba magandang sample diyan? May correlation ba? Ito sample, nakakatawa. May correlation ba yung nag-aral ka sa UP sa ikaw ay may saltik? May gano'n na, may correlation ba? O tapos hahanap ka ng mga ng mga sample mo doon sa mga graduate ng UP tapos titingnan mo dun sa let's say pumunta ka sa Mandaluyong hospital, kasi yung hospital na para sa sa mga may mental disorders. Tapos titingnan mo, meron ba mga na-admit doon ng mga galing or mga product ng UP, whether they graduate or hindi graduate. Mga ganon. Sample lang yan correlation research. In 2020, Plus illustrates 3 cases on correlation research as follows. Nagbigay pa ako ng sample. Ito, medyo mas formal. You want to know if wealthy people are less likely to be patient. From your experience, you believe that wealthy people are impatient. However, you want to establish a statistical pattern that proves or disproves your belief. So in this case, you can carry out correlational research to identify a trend that links both variables. Diba? Kaya nga, titingnan mo, may trend ba? But again, you have to describe it extensively in your scope and limitation sa mga correlational research, hindi yan yung one size fits all at hindi siya yung pwede mong ipag-generalize. You want to know if there's a correlation between how much people earn and the number of children that they have. You do not believe that people with more spending power have more children than people with less spending power. Kasi di ba napapansin mo parang yung mga may kaya, may pera, parang konti ang babies nila. So yun yung mga gagawan mo ng correlation research. Di ba? Pwedeng ganon. Another case, you believe that domestic violence causes a brain hemorrhage. You cannot carry out an experiment as it would be unethical to deliberately subject people to domestic violence. Kaya magtitingin ka ng study, mga previews, mga statistics, technically statistics. I-review mo yung statistics. Yan. So, we also do comparative research. So, sa comparative research, you compare 2 or more persons or phenomena, so on one variable. So, you investigate possible cause and effect relationships by observing existing consequences. So, ano yung mga samples of comparative surveys? Gallup po, General Social Survey, Eurobarometer, European Community Household Study, and International Social Survey Program. So, International Social Survey Program, ginagamit natin dito sa Pilipinas yan, ISSP. Although ginagamit yung iba dito, I suggest na tingnan ninyo lahat ng mga comparative surveys na ginawa. Tapos tingnan ninyo, possible ba na parang medyo i-apply ko to sa comparative survey. Comparative research. Okay? Action research. Ayan. So when we talk about action research, so it solves a problem either in classroom or office setting. So it develops new skills to solve problems. Itong sample ng action research is effect of technology on enthusiasm for learning science by Jane L. Hollis of Lake City Middle School. So she investigated how the integration of technology into their middle school science curriculum would impact her students' enthusiasm for learning science. Actually, marami sa inyo, especially sa hospitality management, ang gagawin ninyo is action research. And mostly yung mga nag-experiment sa inyo, yung magtitingnan sa inyo, it's action research. Now, ano ang gagawin ninyo na sa chapter 3? So, ano yung you have to describe which research design will you use for your study. Describe mo yung research, mga 1 to 2, mga 1 paragraph. Siguro yung 1 paragraph mo, mga 3 to 4 sentences. Okay? And then you also describe your methods of data collection. Write comprehensively the methods you use for gathering or collecting your data. Ha? So, pwede kang hindi lang paragraph, pwedeng mag-bullet style, yung di-describe mo ano yung mga data na i-collect mo. Research instrument, papaano mo sila i-collect? Ano yung mga gagamitin mo na instrument. So, this is where you comprehensively describe the instruments you use for search. They may be physical tools, ano yung mga theories. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, tingnan ninyo dun sa chapter 2 ninyo. Chapter 2 or chapter 1 yung sa related studies ninyo, or related literatures ninyo, ano yung mga theories na gagamitin ninyo. Kung may mga formula kayong gagamitin, lalo na kung doon sa magsasampling, and other tools that will help you arrive at your thesis. And then, kung kayo ay magsasurvey, so you will do population and sample of the study. So if you are utilizing survey, you describe the population, where you will conduct the survey, and how you come up with the sample size. Kaya nga malaking bagay kung anong formula, kung gagamit kayo ng formula katulad ng pinakita ko sa inyo kanina dun sa research instrument. And then the data processing and statistical treatment, especially if you do survey, you describe how you analyze the data gathered and the statistical analysis tools that you will use to come up with your findings. Okay? So, pagka nagawa nyo na yan, what you will do is, magbibigay ako ng sample dito. Isahin ko. And then this will apply, of course, no? This will apply for all subjects. So, chapter 3. Yan. So, ito naman ay for research methodology. Yan. So, ang gagawin nyo dito is, I want you to upload the link. Copy the link na lang. Para hindi na, kasi nagiging ako yung may-ari eh. Copy the Google Docs link in the provided Google Sheet. Okay. So, ano yung Google Sheet na gagamitin natin? For example, in this case, ito ay TM1. Yan. Ang gagawin ninyo, Bubuksan ko to. Yan. So, para hindi na nawawala. So, dito na yung research topic. Ilalagay ko na dito yung link of Google Docs. Yan. Diyan nyo ilalagay. Kakopy nyo lang yung link dyan. So, pwedeng gawin natin. Oh, gawin nyo yan. Oh. Yan. Tapos dyan yung ikakopy yung link. Okay? So, I think it's best na light lang. Yan. Diyan ninyo gawin. Para ang mangyayari, ikakopy nyo lang yung link dito. Para hindi ako ang maging may-ari. Para hindi ako yung maging owner ng Google Docs niyo. Kasi there are times na hindi ko nababasa mga messages niyo. Okay? So, kailan ang deadline nito? Ang deadline nito is I'm giving you until sige. Next Monday. Oh. Okay? To do it. So, ay mali. So, this is chapter 3. Yeah. Research methodology. Yeah. Okay? Ay, teka, hindi ko pala naayos. Kakopy ko pala. Para hindi na mawala yung access ninyo dun sa file niyo. Okay? So I think that's it for me. Thank you and see you on okay. So ngayong Wednesday kasi instead na mag-lecture ako, i-meet ko kayo. You work on your manuscript. Chapter 3. So for this week, you work on your manuscript. Tapos siguro by Friday, no, hindi na rin ako maghihintay ng consultation kasi alam ko na matrabaho yan. Ayoko na magpapa-consult kayo tapos kulang pa. Kulang pa yung mga datos niyo na, ay teka, parang kulang pa yung mga information na ilalagay tapos magpapa-consult na kayo kaagad. Remember, sa ipapa-consult niyo na is chapter 3 by next week. Okay? Sige. Bye!